Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. I was riding my motorcycle to visit my stepsister when this happened. It was late at night, much later than I should have still been on the road, but I had convinced myself that I could keep going for a few more hours. I had already been riding for a long time. By the time I reached the Buffalo area, I was tired enough that I should have found a motel and stopped for the night. That would have been the smart decision. I could have taken a shower, slept for several hours, and continued the trip in the morning when there was daylight and more traffic around. Instead, I kept thinking about how close I was getting to my destination. A motel would cost money. I would have to pull off the highway, find a room, unload anything valuable from the motorcycle, and then lose several hours the next morning getting ready to leave again. It seemed easier to keep riding. I told myself I could make it. There were only a few more hours left. I had already traveled that far without a problem, so why stop now? That kind of thinking becomes very dangerous when you are exhausted. You stop making decisions based on what is safe and begin making them based on what is most convenient. At the time, I believed I was being determined. Looking back, I was simply being reckless. It was around 3 in the morning when I found myself about halfway to Albany, traveling east on the New York State Thruway. The highway was almost completely deserted. During the day, the Thruway could be crowded with trucks, cars, and families traveling between cities. At 3 in the morning, there was hardly anyone around. Every now and then, I would see the lights of another vehicle far ahead or behind me, but most of the time I had the road to myself. That emptiness felt peaceful at first. There were no cars cutting in front of me, no slow drivers blocking the passing lane, and no heavy traffic forcing me to remain constantly alert. I could hold a steady speed and continue toward Albany without interruption. I was traveling at around 80 miles per hour. That was fast, especially on a motorcycle at night, but the highway seemed open and clear. With no nearby traffic, 80 did not feel as dangerous as it should have. The night air helped keep me awake for a while. It pushed against my jacket and helmet, and the vibration of the motorcycle traveled through my arms and body. Riding usually demands enough attention that falling asleep seems impossible. But exhaustion can overcome almost anything. After hours on the road, the wind stopped feeling refreshing. It became another constant sensation that my mind began to ignore. The engine made the same steady sound. The road stretched ahead in the same dark pattern. My eyes were open, but I could feel my focus becoming weaker. I had to remind myself to look farther down the road. I shifted my position on the seat. I moved my shoulders, stretched my fingers against the handlebars, and tried to make myself uncomfortable enough to remain alert. I knew I was tired. I just did not want to admit how tired. The New York State Thruway was in rough condition in those days. Large trucks traveled on it constantly, and their weight had damaged the right lane. When I rode in the main lane, the motorcycle passed over one worn section after another. Thump, 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 the repeated impact traveled through the tires and suspension. It was not strong enough to throw me from the bike, but it was irritating and uncomfortable. The wheels of heavy trucks had created deep, uneven tracks in the pavement. The surface had been pressed down and damaged from years of traffic. Every few seconds, the motorcycle moved over another rough section. Thump, thump, thump. At first, that movement helped keep me awake. Each bump reminded me that I was still moving quickly and needed to pay attention. After a while, however, the sound became almost hypnotic. The pattern repeated again and again. Dark road, white lane markers, wind, engine, thump, thump, thump. I decided to move into the passing lane. The left lane was much smoother because fewer heavy trucks used it. There were no cars nearby, so I did not believe I was blocking anyone. The moment I changed lanes, the ride became more comfortable. The constant pounding stopped. The motorcycle settled onto smoother pavement, and the handlebars felt steadier beneath my hands. That should have made the ride easier. Instead, the smooth road made it harder to stay awake. Without the rough pavement shaking me, the ride became almost too calm. The darkness beyond my headlight seemed endless, and the lane markers passed beneath me at a steady rhythm. Motorcycles do not travel exactly through the center of a lane the way many people imagine. Most riders position the motorcycle in either the left or right tire track. Those are the areas where the tires of cars normally travel. The center of the lane can collect oil, water, small debris, and other materials dropped by vehicles. Riding directly in the center is sometimes less safe, especially in poor weather. In the passing lane, I chose one of the tire tracks and continued at about 80 miles per hour. I was riding a 1979 Honda. It was a good motorcycle, but it was old, and the headlight was not especially powerful. Modern motorcycle headlights can light a large section of road. The light on that Honda did not reach very far. At 80 miles per hour, that mattered. The faster you travel, the less time you have to react to anything that appears in the beam. The headlight showed me a narrow section of road ahead. Beyond that small area, everything disappeared into darkness. I could see the white lane markings, the pavement directly in front of me, and sometimes the reflective signs along the highway. I could not see far enough to safely identify a small object long before reaching it. I knew that, but I continued riding quickly anyway. There are moments when you understand a risk in an abstract way without truly feeling it. I knew an animal could run onto the road. I knew a piece of metal or debris could fall from a truck. I knew there could be a stopped vehicle beyond the reach of my headlight. But the highway had been empty for so long that the danger felt theoretical. Nothing had appeared in front of me yet, so part of my mind assumed nothing would. The lack of traffic also made me feel protected. If there were cars around, their headlights would have illuminated more of the road. Their movements might have warned me about an obstacle. Alone, I had only the weak headlight on the Honda. I kept fighting sleep. I would blink and then realize my eyes had remained closed slightly longer than they should have. I tried taking deeper breaths inside my helmet. I thought about my stepsister and how close I was getting. I promised myself I would stop at the next rest area. Then I would pass an exit or sign and decide I could continue to the one after that. This is one of the worst habits a tired driver can have. You keep moving the point where you plan to stop. 5 more miles, 10 more minutes, 1 more rest area. You believe you are saving time, but you are actually gambling with your life. The darkness made it difficult to judge how fast I was traveling. The motorcycle said 80, but there were few nearby objects to show that speed. Trees, signs, and barriers appeared briefly in the headlight and then vanished behind me. I was covering more than 100 feet every second. Any obstacle inside the lane would appear and reach me almost immediately. Then the headlight flashed across something. For less than a second, I saw a complete tire lying in the other tire track of the passing lane. It was not a small strip of rubber. It was not a flat piece from a damaged truck tire. It looked like an entire tire lying across the pavement. The light touched it, and then it was gone behind me. The whole thing happened so quickly that I barely had time to understand what I had seen. One moment, there was only empty road. The next, a dark circular shape filled part of the lane beside me. Then I had already passed it. I did not turn the handlebars. I did not brake. I did not have time to react at all. The tire had been lying in the opposite tire track from the one I was using. If I had chosen the other side of the lane, I would have hit it at 80 miles per hour. That thought entered my mind immediately. My entire body became awake. The tiredness disappeared so suddenly, it felt as if someone had poured ice water over me. My heart began pounding. My hands tightened around the handlebars. The road no longer looked peaceful or empty. It looked full of things I could not see. I imagined my front wheel hitting the tire. A car might strike an obstacle and become damaged, but the driver could still have some protection. On a motorcycle, hitting a full tire at 80 miles per hour would almost certainly have thrown me from the bike. The front wheel could have stopped or turned sharply. The motorcycle might have flipped. I could have been thrown across the pavement, into a barrier, or beneath another vehicle. Even with protective clothing and a helmet, the chances of surviving would not have been good. There was almost no traffic, which had seemed like an advantage earlier. Now it seemed dangerous in another way. If I had crashed, nobody might have seen it happen. I could have been lying injured beside the highway for a long time before another driver noticed me. The motorcycle might have continued sliding into the darkness. My family would only know that I had never arrived. The tire had been no more than a few feet away from my front wheel. I had passed it because of luck, not skill. I had chosen one tire track instead of the other. There had been no warning. No brake lights, no car swerving around the obstacle, no reflective surface to make it visible from a distance. My weak headlight showed it only at the final moment. I moved back into the main lane. The rough pavement returned beneath me. Thump, thump, thump. This time, I welcomed every impact. The bumps no longer seemed irritating. They felt like proof that I was awake and still on the motorcycle. I reduced my speed and kept looking for the next rest area. I was completely alert now, but I knew the fear would not protect me forever. Adrenaline can wake you temporarily, but exhaustion remains underneath it. If I continued for another hour, the tiredness could return. The next obstacle might be in my tire track. I thought about going back to warn someone about the tire, but turning around on the thruway was not simple. There was no safe place to cross the median, and I had already passed it at high speed. I hoped another driver would see it in time. A car or truck could probably survive hitting it better than I could, but it could still cause a serious crash. I watched every inch of road illuminated by the headlight. Every shadow looked like another object. Dark patches in the pavement made my muscles tighten. Small pieces of rubbish made me move slightly within the lane. For the first time that night, I truly understood how little I could see. I had been trusting the road to remain clear beyond the headlight. The tire proved that trust was foolish. Eventually, I saw a sign for a rest stop. I took the exit immediately. The rest area was quiet, but the building was open. There were lights, vending machines, bathrooms, and a place to sit. I parked the motorcycle and climbed off. Once my feet touched the ground, I realized how tense my body had become. My legs felt stiff. My shoulders hurt from holding the handlebars. My hands were shaking slightly. I went inside and bought coffee. I sat there for around half an hour, drinking it slowly. The coffee was hot and probably not very good, but it felt necessary. I watched the other people moving through the rest area. There were truck drivers, tired travelers and employees working through the night. Nobody knew how close I had just come to crashing. To them, I was only another motorcyclist stopping for coffee. I kept replaying the tire in my mind. The headlight flashed over it. The dark rubber shape appeared. Then it disappeared behind me. I tried to calculate how close I had been. A motorcycle tire track is not very far from the other one. I had probably passed within only a couple of feet. If I had moved across the lane for any reason, I could have hit it. Riders often change position to avoid rough pavement or improve visibility. I could easily have switched tracks seconds before reaching the obstacle. The fact that I did not was random. That was what frightened me most. There was nothing I had done correctly to save myself. I had made almost every bad decision possible. I had continued after becoming tired. I had refused to get a motel. I had been traveling too fast for the distance illuminated by my headlight. I had moved into the smoother lane because it was more comfortable, even though the smoothness made me more tired. The only reason I survived was that the tire happened to be in the other part of the lane. Sitting at the rest area, I finally admitted that I had been too tired to ride safely. The near miss did not prove I was capable of continuing. It proved I should have stopped much earlier. I finished the coffee and waited until I felt more stable. I washed my face with cold water. I walked around for a little while and stretched my legs. Eventually, I returned to the motorcycle and continued the trip, but I rode differently. I slowed down. I stayed more aware of the distance my headlight covered. I stopped treating the empty highway like a safe place to speed. I reached my stepsisters safely. When I told the story later, it did not sound as dramatic as it had felt. I had seen a tire in the road. I had missed it. Nothing had actually happened. There was no crash, injury, or damaged motorcycle. But near misses can teach lessons as clearly as accidents. The absence of a crash did not mean the situation had been safe. It meant I had been given another chance. After that night, I made a decision. Whenever possible, I would stop driving or riding by sundown. That did not mean I never traveled after dark again. Sometimes it was necessary. Plans changed, work ended late, or a trip took longer than expected. But I stopped treating long overnight rides as something to be proud of. I no longer believed that determination could replace sleep. I learned to respect fatigue. Driving tired can be as dangerous as driving after drinking. Your reaction time becomes slower, your attention drifts, you stop noticing small changes in the road. On a motorcycle, those problems are even more serious. There is no metal frame around you. There is no seat belt. There is no second chance after the front wheel hits something at highway speed. A rider has to notice danger early enough to avoid it. That night, my headlight did not give me enough time. The only thing that saved me was my position in the lane. For years. Afterward, whenever I rode at night, I remembered that tire. Dark objects on the road were difficult to see until I was close to them. A tire, animal, fallen branch, or piece of metal could disappear against the pavement. I became more careful about speed. I also became more willing to stop. There is a strange pressure people place on themselves during long trips. They want to finish. They want to prove they can handle the distance. Stopping feels like failure. It is not. A motel room costs money, but it costs much less than a hospital stay, a destroyed motorcycle, or a funeral. Half an hour at a rest stop can feel like wasted time, but it may save your life. I knew those things before the trip, but I did not truly understand them until I saw the tire. Sometimes I think about the person who lost it. Maybe it had fallen from the back of a truck. Maybe it had been part of a trailer. Maybe a vehicle had experienced a blowout and left the tire behind. Whoever caused it may never have known how dangerous it became. A simple object had turned into a deadly obstacle because it was lying in a dark lane at 3 in the morning. Another motorcyclist could have hit it. A car might have swerved and crashed into the barrier. A truck could have thrown it into another lane. I hope someone reported it before anyone was injured. I never found out. My memory of the moment remains very short. There was no long period of fear before I saw it, no warning. Only the road, the weak headlight, and a sudden flash of black rubber. That is how many serious accidents happen. You can be comfortable 1 second and fighting for your life the next. I had been half asleep, moving at 80 miles per hour through darkness. After the tire, I understood how little control I really had. I could control my speed. I could choose when to stop. I could decide whether to ride while exhausted, but I could not control what was lying beyond the reach of my headlight. The best protection was to avoid putting myself in that situation. That was why I decided to stop traveling at sundown whenever I could. Daylight does not remove every danger, but it gives you time. You can see farther. You can notice debris, animals, damaged pavement, and stopped vehicles. You are also less likely to be fighting sleep after a full day of travel. I still enjoy motorcycles, and I do not think riding itself was the mistake. The mistake was believing I could force my body to remain alert because I wanted to finish the journey. The body does not care about plans. When it needs sleep, concentration begins to fail whether you admit it or not. I was lucky enough to receive a warning before that failure killed me. The warning was an entire tire lying in the passing lane of the New York State Thruway. My headlight showed it for less than a second. I missed it by a few feet. That was enough to change the way I traveled for the rest of my life. I am not sure if this really happened. That is the first thing I need to say, because I know how strange the memory sounds. It may have been a dream. It may have been several dreams that became mixed together in my mind. It may have been something I imagined as a very young child and later started believing was real. But the memory itself feels real. It does not feel like a normal dream that slowly disappeared after I woke up. It feels like something from my early childhood, like a room I once lived in or a person I used to know. The details are unclear in some places, but the feeling of it has stayed with me for years. In this memory, I had 2 mothers. One of them lived downstairs. The other one was always upstairs. At the time, this did not seem strange to me. I was young enough that I did not question why there were 2 versions of the same person inside our house. I did not think about how impossible it was. I simply accepted that there was a mother downstairs and another mother upstairs. They looked similar, but I could always tell them apart. The mother downstairs was the nice one. She felt warm and safe. When I was near her, I did not feel afraid. She spoke to me kindly and took care of me. I remember her moving around the lower part of the house, doing ordinary things and making food. The mother upstairs was different. She always seemed to be in the same place. I do not remember seeing her walking through the house or doing normal things. She was simply upstairs, waiting in one particular area, almost like she belonged to that part of the house and nowhere else. She looked like my mother, but something about her was wrong. She seemed darker. I do not know if I mean her skin, her clothes, or the shadows around her. When I try to picture her now, the memory is covered in darkness. The upstairs area was dim, and her face was harder to see. She felt evil. I did not know the word evil clearly when I was that young, but that is the best word I have now. The feeling around her was heavy and cold. I knew I should not stay near her for too long. The strange part is that she never attacked me in the memory. She never chased me down the stairs. She never screamed at me or tried to hurt me. She simply stayed upstairs in the same place, and I knew something was wrong with her. Sometimes the things that frighten children are difficult to explain. A child may look at a person and feel that the person is dangerous without understanding why. Maybe it is the way they stare. Maybe it is the lack of expression on their face. Maybe it is only a shadow or the shape of the room. Whatever the reason, I did not trust the upstairs mother. The downstairs mother was the opposite. My clearest memory of her is the soup. She used to make me a red soup. I remember the color more than the taste. It was bright or dark red, depending on how I picture it. Sometimes I imagine it looking like tomato soup. Other times it seems thicker and deeper in color. I do not remember what was inside it. I do not remember seeing vegetables, meat, noodles, or anything else. I only remember sitting downstairs while the good mother gave me a bowl of red soup. It felt familiar. It was not something she made once. In the memory, it seemed like she made it often. It was one of the things I connected with her. The soup was comforting. When I picture it, I remember warmth coming from the bowl. I remember the safe feeling of being downstairs, away from the darker mother above us. The house itself is difficult to remember. I cannot clearly describe the furniture, the color of the walls, or the shape of every room. I mostly remember the difference between the two floors. Downstairs was brighter. Upstairs was darker. Downstairs had the kind mother and the red soup. Upstairs had the other mother, always standing or sitting in the same place. There may have been a staircase between them, but I do not remember every step. I only remember moving from one area to the other. I think I visited the upstairs mother more than once. I do not know why. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I was too young to understand that I should avoid her. Children often return to things that frighten them. They look into dark rooms, check under beds, or walk toward strange sounds because they want to understand what is there. I may have done the same thing. I remember looking at the upstairs mother and knowing she was not the same as the one below. She seemed almost like a copy. The face may have been similar, but the feeling was different. The downstairs mother belonged to my life. The upstairs mother felt like something pretending. Even now, when I think about her, I imagine her looking down toward me without moving. She did not need to speak. Her presence alone was enough to make the upstairs area feel unsafe. The strange thing is that I do not remember telling anyone about her. I did not tell my real mother that another version of her was upstairs. I did not ask why there were two of them. Inside the memory, having two mothers was normal. That is one reason I wonder if it was a dream. Dreams often contain impossible things that seem completely ordinary while they are happening. You can be inside a house you have never seen, talking to two versions of the same person, and your mind accepts it without question. Only after waking do you realize it made no sense. But I do not remember waking from this memory. I do not remember opening my eyes and thinking it had been a nightmare. It feels connected to my childhood, not to one night of sleep. There was one day when I decided the two mothers should meet. I do not know why I made that decision. Maybe I thought the downstairs mother did not know there was another version of her upstairs. Maybe I wanted the kind mother to protect me. Maybe I thought bringing them together would explain which one was real. In the simple thinking of a child, it probably seemed like an obvious idea. There were two mothers in one house. They should meet each other. I remember going to the mother downstairs. She was the one I trusted. I brought her toward the stairs. I wanted to take her up to the place where the darker mother stayed. The memory becomes stronger as I picture the beginning of that moment. I can almost feel myself moving through the house. I can remember knowing that the other mother was waiting above us. I remember bringing the good mother upstairs. Then the memory ends. There is nothing after that. I do not remember the two mothers looking at each other. I do not remember either of them speaking. I do not remember whether the upstairs mother became angry or disappeared. I do not remember running away. The memory simply stops at the moment when they were about to meet. That missing part has bothered me for years. Why do I remember everything leading up to it, but nothing afterward? Did I wake up at that exact moment? Did something frightening happen that my mind refused to keep? Or was there never a complete story in the first place? Maybe it was only a child's imagination creating disconnected scenes. For a long time, I did not think deeply about the memory. It stayed somewhere in the back of my mind with other early childhood experiences. Everyone has memories from when they were very young that are incomplete or strange. Sometimes you remember a room but not why you were there. Sometimes you remember a person's face but not their name. Sometimes something a parent told you becomes mixed with something you actually saw. I assumed the two mothers were part of that kind of confusion. The memory felt real, but I did not have a reason to question it. The red soup was the most normal part. I believed my mother had made it for me when I was little. As I grew older, I forgot many of the small details, but I continued remembering that soup. One day, years later, I asked my mother to make it again. I expected her to know exactly what I meant. To me, it was part of our shared past. I believed she had made the soup many times when I was a child. I may have described it as the red soup she always made for me. My mother looked confused. She told me she had never made red soup for me. At first, I thought she had simply forgotten. Parents do many things for children, and not every meal remains important in their memory. Something that felt special to me may have been completely ordinary to her. I tried to explain it again. The soup was red. She used to give it to me when I was young. I remembered eating it downstairs, but she continued saying she had never made anything like that. There was no family recipe. There was no meal she recognized from my description. She had no memory of giving me red soup. That was when the rest of the memory returned with much more force. The downstairs mother. The upstairs mother. The dark feeling. The moment I tried to bring them together. If my real mother had never made the soup, then who was the woman in my memory? That question frightened me, even though I knew there were normal explanations. A child can dream about food. I may have seen red soup in a cartoon, film, or book. Maybe another family member made something similar, and over time I placed my mother into the memory. Maybe it was tomato soup and my mother simply forgot. But the certainty I had felt was difficult to ignore. I had not asked whether she had ever made red soup. I had asked her to make it again. I believed it was something we both remembered. Her answer made me realize that the entire memory may never have happened. The house with two mothers might not have been real. The upstairs woman might never have existed. The kind mother downstairs might also have been part of the dream. That idea was unsettling in a different way. If none of it happened, why did it feel like a real part of my childhood? Why had my mind saved it for so long? Most dreams do not remain clear for years, especially dreams from such a young age. Yet this one had stayed hidden inside me with the feeling of a true memory. I began trying to understand how memory works. Very early childhood memories are not always reliable. A child's brain is still developing, and memories can change each time they are remembered. A dream can become mixed with a real place. A story told by an adult can become something the child believes they personally experienced. Photographs can create memories of moments that the person was too young to remember clearly. Maybe the two mothers were created from something simple. My real mother may have been downstairs while a coat or shadow upstairs looked like her. Maybe I saw my reflection in a dark mirror and believed another mother was standing there. Maybe another woman visited the house, and my young mind decided she was a second version of my mother. There could have been a television playing upstairs. There could have been a photograph, doll, or shape that I misunderstood. But those explanations do not match the feeling. The upstairs mother felt aware of me. She felt like a person. I remember knowing that she was my mother and also knowing she was not the good one. It was not only her appearance that made her different. It was something deeper, something I could feel without understanding. Sometimes I wonder if the two mothers represented two sides of the same person. Children do not always understand that parents can be kind at one moment and angry at another. A young mind might separate those behaviors into two different people. The downstairs mother could have been the comforting version who fed me and cared for me. The upstairs mother could have represented fear, punishment, or anger. Maybe my brain turned emotions into physical characters. That would explain why they looked the same, but felt completely different. The red soup might have been a symbol of comfort rather than a real meal. But I do not remember being afraid of my actual mother. The memory does not feel like it came from anger toward her. The darker woman felt separate, like an intruder wearing a familiar face. I also wonder about the upstairs area. Why was the evil mother always in the same place? People in normal memories move around. They enter rooms, sit down, and speak. The upstairs mother was almost frozen. She may have been part of a recurring dream. Every time I dreamed it, she appeared in the same spot. That would explain why I remember her as something waiting rather than living. Maybe the dream repeated for several nights. Over time, the different dreams became one memory. In one dream, I saw the mother upstairs. In another, the mother downstairs made soup. In the final dream, I tried to bring them together. When combined, they became a complete world that felt like part of my childhood. The ending may be missing because I woke up before anything happened. That is probably the simplest explanation. Still, I sometimes imagine what might have happened if the memory had continued. Would the downstairs mother have seen the dark one? Would she have recognized her? Would one of them have disappeared? Maybe the upstairs mother would have become angry because I had exposed her. Maybe the good mother would have told me there was nobody there. Perhaps the moment they met would have shown me which one was real. The fact that I remember none of it makes the event feel unfinished. It is like a story with the final page removed. The question about the soup made the memory even more disturbing, because it was the only part I thought could be proven. The two mothers were impossible, but the soup was ordinary. If my mother remembered making it, I could tell myself the dream had been built around a real meal. When she denied it, I lost that connection. Everything became uncertain. Maybe I never ate the soup. Maybe I never walked through that house. Maybe I never stood at the bottom of the stairs with a woman who looked like my mother. If the memory is false, then my mind created an entire childhood experience that I believed for years. That is almost as frightening as believing the second mother was real. We depend on memories to tell us who we are. We trust them because they feel personal. But feelings are not proof. A memory can be detailed, emotional, and completely wrong. That means there may be other moments from my early life that never happened the way I remember them. There may be conversations no one ever had. There may be places I never visited. There may be people who only existed in dreams. Most of the time, I do not think about the two mothers. Life continues, and the memory remains distant. Then something brings it back. The smell of soup, a dark staircase, a person standing silently at the top of a hallway, a film or story where someone sees a copy of a family member. When that happens, I feel the same discomfort I felt as a child. I picture the nice mother downstairs. I picture the darker one above. I remember believing both of them belonged in the house. I do not know whether the real house had 2 floors. I do not know whether the rooms looked anything like the ones in my memory. Sometimes the entire setting feels familiar. Other times it seems like a place that could never have existed. The downstairs is warm but unclear. The upstairs is dark but sharp. That difference seems important. The good parts of the memory are soft. The frightening part is more solid. Maybe fear made it stronger. The brain often holds on to dangerous or upsetting experiences more clearly than ordinary ones. Even if the upstairs mother was only part of a nightmare, the fear she created may have helped the memory survive. The soup remained because it was connected to safety. One image represented comfort, the other represented danger. Together, they formed a childhood memory that my mind refused to release. I have never found an answer. I cannot ask anyone else who was there because I do not know when it supposedly happened. I do not know what house I was in or how old I was. My mother does not remember the soup. As far as I know, she never knew anything about a second mother upstairs. There is no photograph or family story that explains it. There is only my memory. Part of me believes it was a dream. That is the explanation that makes the most sense. Children have vivid dreams. They may not understand the difference between dreaming and remembering, especially when the dream is repeated. Another part of me remains uncertain. The memory feels too calm in some places to be a normal nightmare. I was afraid of the upstairs mother, but the world around her seemed stable. I knew where she would be. I knew the downstairs mother was safe. I had rules for that impossible house, and I understood them. Dreams can feel like that, but so can memories. I do not believe there were truly two versions of my mother living in one house. I do not believe an evil copy waited upstairs while another cooked for me below. But belief and memory are different things. I can reject the event logically and still feel that I was there. I can tell myself the soup never existed and still almost remember its warmth. I can say the upstairs mother was only a dream and still picture her waiting in the darkness. Maybe one day I will remember more. Maybe another forgotten detail will explain everything. Or maybe the memory will remain exactly as it is, incomplete, impossible, and strangely vivid. A good mother downstairs. A darker mother upstairs. A bowl of red soup that my real mother says she never made. And a child leading one mother toward the other with no memory of what happened when they finally met. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, I was home with my 3 sisters while our parents were out. At the time, my oldest sister was only about 13 or 14. She was still a child herself, but because she was the oldest, our parents trusted her to watch the rest of us for a short time. To me, she seemed much older and more responsible. I believed she knew what to do in every situation, even though she was probably just as unsure and frightened as the rest of us when something went wrong. There were 4 of us in the house that day. My oldest sister was sitting with me in the lounge room. My other 2 sisters were somewhere else in the house, probably talking, playing, or doing their own thing. Nothing unusual was happening. We were used to being at home together. Our parents had rules for us when they went out. We were not supposed to answer the door for strangers. We were not supposed to leave the house. We were also told not to use the house phone unless there was an emergency. This was before young children regularly had mobile phones. None of us had one. If we needed help, the only way to contact anyone was through the landline inside the house. The problem was that none of us really knew how to use it properly. We knew it was a phone, of course. We had seen our parents make calls. But we did not know which numbers to call in an emergency, how to explain our address, or what to say if a stranger answered. Our parents had told us not to play with the phone, so we avoided touching it. At 6 or 7 years old, rules can feel very strict. Do not use the phone unless it is an emergency did not sound like permission to call whenever we felt frightened. We were afraid of getting in trouble if we used it for the wrong reason. That day, the house felt normal and safe. My oldest sister and I were sitting in the lounge room, probably watching television or talking. I do not remember exactly what was playing or what we were discussing. Those ordinary details disappeared from my memory because of what happened next. My two other sisters came toward the kitchen or lounge area to get a snack. The house was calm. Then, someone knocked on the front door. The sound immediately made all of us stop. It was not unusual for someone to knock during the day. It could have been a neighbor, a delivery person, or someone looking for our parents. Still, we knew we were not supposed to answer the door. My second youngest sister and I reacted by running behind the table. We were very young, and hiding felt like the safest thing to do. The table did not offer real protection, but it placed something between us and the door. We crouched down and tried to stay quiet. My second oldest sister moved carefully toward the corner where she could look toward the entrance without standing directly in front of it. She peeked around. Through a window, glass panel, or small opening near the door, she saw the shape of a man standing outside. She later described him as being around 6 feet tall. To children, an adult man of that height looked enormous. He appeared to be somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. We could not see every detail clearly, but we could hear his voice. At first, he knocked again. Then, the knocking became pounding. The sound filled the house. He was not politely tapping on the door and waiting for someone to answer. He was hitting it hard enough to frighten all of us. He began shouting a name. I do not remember the exact name now, or I would rather not repeat it. It sounded like he was calling for someone he believed was inside our home. "Are you okay?" he shouted. "Are you in there?" He sounded desperate, angry, or confused. We had no idea who he was talking about. The name did not belong to anyone in our family. There was no boy in the house. There was only my sisters and me. The man kept pounding. Each impact made me think the door might open. I stayed hidden behind the table with my sister, trying not to make a sound. I was afraid that if he heard children inside, he would know our parents were gone. At that age, I did not know how strong a locked front door really was. In my mind, an adult could break through it if he hit it hard enough. I imagined the lock snapping. I imagined the door flying open. I imagined the man stepping into the house and finding us hiding. The shouting continued. He kept calling for the person he believed was inside. "Are you okay? Are you in there?" His voice was loud enough that there was no chance we had misunderstood him. He genuinely believed, or claimed to believe, that someone he knew was inside our home. My oldest sister quickly took control of the situation. She gathered us together and moved us into a hiding place farther away from the front door. I do not remember exactly where she hid us. It may have been in another room, behind furniture, or in an area where we could not be seen from the windows. What I remember is the feeling of being rushed away while trying to remain silent. My oldest sister whispered to us and told us not to speak. She tried to keep us calm. She was 13 or 14, but she had suddenly become responsible for protecting 3 younger children from a strange adult man pounding on the door. I cannot imagine how frightened she must have been. She could not call our parents because none of us knew how to use the landline confidently. She could not go outside for help because the man was standing near the entrance. She could not ask a neighbor to come over. All she could do was hide us and hope he left. The man continued pounding on the door. The 5 minutes he remained there felt much longer. When you are a child and afraid, time moves differently. Each second feels slow. Every pause between knocks makes you wonder what the person outside is doing. When the pounding stopped for a moment, I thought he might be trying another door or window. When it started again, I jumped. I remember listening for the sound of glass breaking. I expected to hear the back door open. I imagined him walking around the house, searching for another way inside. There were probably several normal explanations for why he did not leave immediately. Maybe he thought the person he wanted was asleep. Maybe he believed they were injured and unable to answer. Maybe he was at the wrong address and had not realized it yet. But to us, his behavior felt threatening. He was an unknown adult, shouting outside a house full of children. We could not understand his intentions. The man sounded like he was searching for his son. The name he shouted seemed to belong to a younger person. He kept asking if that person was okay, which made it sound as if he believed there was an emergency. Part of me wondered if someone was hurt. Maybe a boy had run into our house without us knowing. Maybe he had hidden somewhere. That idea was frightening too. Our house did not feel very large, but suddenly I wondered whether someone else could be inside. Had we heard a door open earlier? Could someone have entered through the back? The strange man's certainty made me question what I knew. He seemed convinced that the person he was looking for was there. My oldest sister did not go searching through the house. Keeping us together was more important. The man's voice changed as the minutes passed. Sometimes he sounded worried. Other times he sounded angry. He struck the door harder and shouted louder. I began to think he might break it down because he believed someone inside was in danger. My sister beside me was also frightened. We stayed close, trying to make ourselves as small and quiet as possible. I could hear breathing around me. No one cried loudly because we were afraid the man would hear us. My oldest sister may have placed a finger to her lips or whispered for us to stay silent. I trusted her completely. If she told us to hide, we hid. If she told us not to move, we did not move. There was no adult inside the house to make decisions. She was the closest thing we had. At some point, the pounding stopped. We remained hidden. Nobody immediately went to check whether the man had left. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. While he was shouting, we knew he was near the front door. When he became quiet, we did not know where he was. He could have walked toward the side of the house. He could have been looking through the windows. He could have been standing still, waiting for someone to believe he was gone. We listened. There were no more knocks. We may have heard footsteps moving away, but I do not remember clearly. My oldest sister waited before allowing anyone to move. Eventually, she carefully looked toward the front of the house. The man was gone. He had been outside for around 5 minutes, though it felt like half an hour. We did not open the door. We did not go outside to see where he went. We stayed inside and waited for our parents to return. The house felt different after he left. Before the knocking, it had been a safe place where 4 children were relaxing. Afterward, every window looked like a place where the man might appear. Every sound outside made us think he had come back. If a car door closed nearby, we froze. If someone walked past the house, we listened carefully. I kept looking toward the entrance. Part of me expected the handle to turn. We talked quietly about who the man might have been. None of us recognized him. We did not know the name he had shouted. There was no reason for him to believe his son, friend, or relative was inside our home. Maybe he had gone to the wrong house. That was the explanation that made the most sense. Our street may have had homes that looked similar. If he was upset or distracted, he might have confused the address. But even if he had made a mistake, his behavior was frightening. A normal person might knock once or twice, realize nobody was answering, and leave. This man pounded on the door and shouted for several minutes. He sounded desperate enough that he may not have been thinking clearly. As I grew older, I began to wonder whether he had been drunk or using drugs. Someone who was intoxicated might have confused our house with another one. They might have forgotten where their son lived or believed something that was not true. His loud voice and aggressive knocking could have come from panic, alcohol, drugs, or a mental health problem. We never found out. When our parents returned, we told them what had happened. I do not remember every detail of their reaction. They were probably worried and asked us to describe the man. They may have checked outside or spoken to neighbors. As far as I know, nobody around us knew who he was. There was no child by the name he shouted living in our house. The man did not return later to apologize. He never explained that he had made a mistake. He simply disappeared after frightening 4 children. For a long time afterward, knocks at the door made me nervous. Even when our parents were home, I wanted someone else to answer. If the knocking was loud or unexpected, I remembered hiding behind the table. I remembered the deep voice outside. I remembered him asking if someone was okay. I also remembered how helpless we had been because none of us knew how to use the phone. That part seems strange now. Calling for help feels simple when you are older. You pick up the phone, dial the emergency number, and explain what is happening. To young children, it is not always simple. We had been taught that the landline was not a toy. We were afraid of using it incorrectly. We did not know whether a man knocking on the door counted as a real emergency. He had not entered the house. He had not broken anything. He had not directly threatened us. We worried that if we called the police and he turned out to be a confused neighbor, we would be in trouble. Children often worry more about breaking rules than recognizing danger. I wish we had known that it was okay to call for help whenever we felt unsafe. Even if the police had only spoken to the man and helped him find the correct house, that would have been better than hiding without any way to contact an adult. My oldest sister did the best she could. She was only 13 or 14. She protected us by keeping everyone quiet and away from the entrance. She did not open the door. She did not confront the man. She did not allow curiosity to put us in danger. Looking back, she handled the situation more calmly than many adults might have. I wonder what she was thinking while she hid us. She probably knew that if the man entered, she would be the person expected to protect 3 younger children. She was not strong enough to fight an adult man. She had no weapon. She had no phone in her pocket. Still, she kept us together. At 6 or 7, I did not fully understand the pressure she was under. I only knew that my older sister was there, and that made me feel slightly safer. The event may not sound terrifying compared to stories where someone actually enters a house or attacks a family. Nothing physically happened to us. The door remained locked. The man eventually left. But fear is different when you are a child. A 6-foot-tall stranger seems enormous. 5 minutes feels endless. A locked door does not feel strong enough. An adult voice shouting outside feels like something that can reach through the walls. I did not know that most doors could survive someone pounding on them. I did not know the man might simply be at the wrong address. I only knew our parents were gone, and someone wanted to get inside. I often think about what could have happened if one of us had answered. Children are curious. If my second oldest sister had opened the door to ask who he was, the man might have tried to enter. If he truly believed his son was inside, he might have pushed past her to search the house. Even if he did not intend to hurt anyone, his confusion and anger could have made the situation dangerous. He may have frightened us, grabbed one of us, or refused to leave. If he was drunk or high, his behavior might have become unpredictable. We were lucky that all of us remembered the rule not to open the door. I also wonder whether someone had given him our address on purpose. Maybe his son had been spending time with people nearby and had mentioned a house that looked like ours. Maybe he followed incorrect directions. Maybe he was looking for someone who used to live there. There could have been an innocent explanation hidden behind his behavior. We never received it. The mystery made the memory stay with me. If the man had returned the next day and apologized, saying he had confused the address, the story might have become funny. We would have understood what happened. Instead, he remained a stranger. He came to our door, shouted for someone we did not know, frightened 4 children, and vanished. Even now, when I remember the scene, I see it from the height of a 6-year-old. The table felt large enough to hide behind. My oldest sister looked grown up, even though she was only a teenager. The man outside seemed taller than the door. His fists sounded powerful when they struck it. His voice filled the house. "Are you okay? Are you in there?" The questions sounded like concern, but they felt like threats because we had no idea who he was speaking to. The strangest part was that he seemed completely certain. He did not ask whether the person lived there. He called the name as if he knew they were inside. That confidence made us question whether we were missing something. Could someone have entered without us noticing? Could the man see something we could not? Nothing was ever found. There was no hidden person. There was no injured boy. It was only us, 4 sisters in a house without their parents, waiting for a stranger to leave. I do not believe anything supernatural happened. The most likely explanation is that the man had the wrong address, was intoxicated, or was confused. But a normal explanation does not change how frightened we were. Danger does not have to be real for the body to react. Our hearts raced. We hid. We expected the door to open. For those 5 minutes, we believed something terrible might happen. The memory also taught me how important it is for children to know what to do in an emergency. They should know how to use a phone. They should know the emergency number. They should know their home address. They should understand that asking for help is more important than worrying about getting in trouble. We did not have that confidence. We had rules, but we did not have a clear plan. Thankfully, my oldest sister made the right choices. She kept us away from the door. She did not answer. She waited until the man had been gone for a while before checking. Because of her, the situation ended safely. Years later, the event may seem small. A stranger knocked on the wrong door. He shouted for someone. Then he left, but I will always remember the fear of hearing his fists against the entrance while our parents were gone. I will remember hiding behind the table with my sister. I will remember my second oldest sister looking around the corner and seeing the shadow of a tall man. I will remember my oldest sister moving us somewhere safe and trying to protect everyone. Most of all, I will remember the silence after the man stopped knocking. We did not know whether he had left. We did not know whether he was walking around the house. We could only wait and hope the locked door was enough. Eventually, he disappeared. We never learned who he was looking for, or why he believed that person was inside our home. Maybe he had made a harmless mistake. Maybe he was drunk or high. Maybe he was dealing with something we could not understand. Whatever the reason, he gave 4 children a memory that none of us easily forgot. It may not sound like the most frightening story in the world, but through the eyes of a 6-year-old, it felt like a stranger was trying to break into our home, while the only person protecting us was a 13-year-old girl. That was more than frightening enough. Before the next witness tells their story, take a moment to subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. This channel is for the late hours, when sleep is close, but the mind is still awake enough to notice every sound in the room. New true stories arrive here for anyone drawn to strange encounters, uneasy memories, and nights that never felt normal again. Leave a like if the stories have pulled you in so far. Now, let's return to the darkness. This happened when I was living with a few roommates. One of my roommates had gone away for the weekend, but before leaving, she told us that her brother would be staying in her bedroom while she was gone. I had never really met him before, so he was basically a stranger to me. Normally, I might have felt uncomfortable with someone I did not know sleeping in the apartment. But my other roommate was a good friend of his. She knew him well and trusted him, so I did not think there would be a problem. He was only staying for a short time, and he would be using his sister's room. I assumed I would barely see him. That night, my boyfriend was staying over with me. We were inside my bedroom watching The Conjuring. It probably was not the best film to watch before trying to sleep, but I had seen enough horror movies that I did not expect it to seriously frighten me. I liked the tense atmosphere, the dark rooms, and the sudden scares, even if I sometimes regretted watching them later when I was alone. My boyfriend fell asleep before the movie ended. He was lying beside me, completely relaxed, while I remained awake. The television was still playing, but I had turned away from it and was trying to fall asleep. The movie continued behind me. I could hear the dialogue, doors creaking, quiet footsteps, and the kind of disturbing music that tells you something bad is about to happen. Every now and then, the volume would rise during a frightening scene, but my boyfriend somehow slept through all of it. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore the film. I was almost asleep when I heard someone enter my bedroom. My door had not been locked because I had no reason to believe anyone would come in. Still, hearing it open in the middle of the night made my entire body tense. At first, I thought I had imagined it. The Conjuring was still playing, so it was possible that the sound had come from the television. The movie was full of scenes where people slowly entered dark rooms. Then I heard real footsteps on my bedroom floor. Someone was inside the room. My heart immediately sank. I stayed completely still with my back facing the television and the doorway. For a few seconds, I did not know what to do. My boyfriend was asleep beside me, and I was afraid that making a sudden movement might cause the person to react. I listened carefully. The footsteps moved farther into the room. They were slow and unsteady, but they were definitely real. The person first walked toward the television. I could not see what they were doing because I was still facing away. I only heard their feet moving across the floor. The frightening music from the movie continued in the background, making everything feel unreal. I wondered whether the visitor was my roommate's brother. He was the only person in the apartment who might not know which room belonged to whom. Maybe he had become confused in the darkness and entered my room by mistake. But even if he had entered the wrong bedroom, why was he not leaving? He continued moving. The footsteps came toward my side of the bed. My fear became much stronger. The person stopped near my bedside table, less than a foot away from me. I could hear him breathing and shifting his weight. My boyfriend still had not woken up. I wanted to whisper his name, but I was afraid the stranger would hear me before my boyfriend did. Then I heard the bedside drawer open. The wooden drawer slid outward with a soft scraping sound. The person began searching through it. I heard objects moving around inside. Small items bumped against one another while his hand dug through my belongings. At that point, I was convinced that someone was stealing from me. I did not keep anything especially valuable in the drawer, but that did not matter. A strange man had entered my bedroom while we were sleeping and was now going through my things. I tried to decide whether to scream, wake my boyfriend, or pretend I was asleep. My body felt frozen. I could hear my own heartbeat, and I was certain the person standing beside me could hear it too. Then another sound began. At first, I could not identify it. It sounded like water being poured directly into the open drawer. There was a steady liquid sound coming from only a few inches away. That confused me so much that some of my fear briefly turned into disbelief. Why would someone come into my bedroom and pour water into my bedside table? Was he destroying something? Had he brought a drink into the room? The sound continued. I finally forced myself to turn around. I moved slowly because I still did not know what I was about to see. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw my roommate's brother standing beside the open drawer. He was urinating into it. For a second, my mind could not understand what was happening. This stranger had walked into my room, opened my bedside drawer, and was peeing directly onto everything inside. He was not looking at me. His eyes were open, but there was something completely empty about his expression. That was when I realized he was sleepwalking. He was not fully awake. Somehow, in his sleeping mind, my drawer had become a toilet. I had heard stories about sleepwalkers doing strange things. People sometimes walked through their homes, opened doors, moved objects, or spoke while still asleep. I had never seen it happen in person. I already found sleepwalking frightening before this happened. The idea of a person moving around while their mind was still asleep had always disturbed me. Seeing it from less than a foot away was much worse. He looked awake enough to stand, walk, open a drawer, and use it like a toilet. But there was no awareness behind his eyes. I did not know whether he could see me. I did not know how he might react if I spoke to him. I had heard people say that waking a sleepwalker could be dangerous. I did not know whether that was actually true, but at the time, I believed he might panic, become violent, or hurt himself if we suddenly frightened him awake. My boyfriend was still sleeping. I considered waking him immediately, but the situation was already so uncomfortable and strange that part of me wanted to avoid making it even more chaotic. I also felt embarrassed for the brother, even though he had just ruined my bedside drawer. He clearly did not know what he was doing. I decided to turn away again. I pulled the blanket closer and faced the other direction, hoping he would finish and leave the room. The sound stopped. The drawer remained open. For a moment, there was silence, except for the movie. The Conjuring had reached another tense scene, and eerie music filled the bedroom. I waited to hear the man walk toward the door. Instead, his footsteps moved toward the end of my bed. I felt the mattress shift slightly as he touched it. Then, he began trying to sit down. That was where I finally lost my patience. I pushed my feet toward him, trying to stop him from sitting on the bed. I did not kick him hard enough to injure him. I was only trying to keep this half-asleep stranger away from me. He did not seem to notice. I pushed against him again with my feet. He still lowered himself onto the end of the mattress. The bed dipped under his weight. I was now trapped in my room with a sleepwalking stranger sitting only a short distance away. I quietly reached toward my boyfriend and tried to wake him. At first, my boyfriend barely reacted. I whispered his name and shook him harder. He finally opened his eyes, confused and irritated at being disturbed. I quietly told him that someone was sitting at the end of the bed. He looked down and saw my roommate's brother. My boyfriend did not react quietly. He immediately began yelling. He demanded to know what the guy was doing in our room. His voice was loud and angry, especially after waking up and suddenly finding a strange man beside us. That was the most frightening moment of the entire experience. The Conjuring was still playing behind us. Creepy music filled the room, perfectly matching what was happening. My roommate's brother slowly turned his head toward us. He did not jump or look confused. He simply stared. His face had the emptiest expression I had ever seen. There was no embarrassment, anger, fear, or understanding. His eyes were open, but it felt as though nobody was behind them. He looked directly at us, while my boyfriend continued shouting. For several seconds, he did not say anything. The combination of the dark room, the horror movie music, and his blank face made the entire scene feel like something from the film. I knew logically that he was sleepwalking, but knowing that did not make the stare less frightening. He looked like a person whose body was awake while everything human inside him was somewhere else. I expected him to suddenly attack us. I thought he might stand up, rush forward, or begin screaming. Instead, he continued staring. My boyfriend and I decided we did not want to stay in the room. We got out of bed and carefully moved around him. He did not try to stop us. We left the bedroom and went into the living room. Neither of us knew what to do next. We sat down and listened for movement from the hallway. My boyfriend wanted to wake the other roommate, but I worried that too many people shouting at the brother could frighten him or make the situation worse. We tried to understand what had just happened. A few minutes earlier, we had been lying in bed. Now my bedside drawer was full of urine, and a sleepwalking stranger was sitting on my mattress. Despite how ridiculous that sounded, I was genuinely terrified. The apartment seemed strangely quiet. The horror movie was still playing inside my room, so we could hear the distant music and voices through the open door. We wondered whether the brother had gone back to his sister's room, or whether he was still sitting at the end of our bed. Maybe 1 minute passed. Then we heard sudden movement. Fast footsteps came from the hallway. Before we could react, my roommate's brother sprinted into the living room. He was moving much faster than he had inside my bedroom. He stopped and stared at us again. His expression was still empty. There was no sign that he recognized us or understood where he was. My boyfriend and I froze on the couch. I was certain he was about to run toward us. Instead, he stood there for a moment, staring with that same disturbing look. Then he turned around and walked or ran back toward the bedrooms. A few seconds later, the apartment became quiet again. He had apparently returned to bed. My boyfriend and I remained in the living room, trying to decide whether it was safe to go back into my room. The situation was frightening, but it was also becoming so absurd that I almost wanted to laugh. The brother had entered my bedroom, used my drawer as a toilet, sat on my bed, stared at us like something from a horror film, and then sprinted into the living room before going back to sleep. Eventually, we checked on him. He was back in his sister's room and appeared to be sleeping normally. He did not seem injured, and he was no longer wandering through the apartment. We returned to my bedroom. The first thing I noticed was the smell. The bedside drawer was ruined. Anything stored inside it had been soaked. I was not going to clean and keep that table. We removed the entire bedside table from the room. I referred to it as the piss table after that because there was no better name for it. Once it was gone, my boyfriend and I returned to bed. I turned off The Conjuring. I had seen enough horror for one night. Even after the room became quiet, I found it difficult to sleep. I kept listening for footsteps in the hallway. Every sound made me think the brother was returning. I imagined him standing in the doorway with the same blank expression. My boyfriend eventually fell asleep again, but I remained awake longer. The logical part of me understood that the brother had not intended to frighten us. He had been asleep. He probably believed he was walking into a bathroom. Still, there was something deeply disturbing about seeing a person move without normal awareness. If he could enter my room, open furniture, and run around the apartment while sleeping, what else could he do? Could he open the front door and walk outside? Could he accidentally hurt himself? Could he pick up something dangerous? Could he become violent if someone tried to wake him? Those questions kept moving through my mind. The next morning, everything became much less frightening and much more embarrassing. My roommate's brother woke up with no memory of what he had done. He did not remember entering my bedroom. He did not remember opening the drawer. He did not remember sitting on the bed, staring at us, or sprinting into the living room. When we told him the story, he was horrified. I could tell he felt terrible. He had not chosen to do any of it, but he still had to hear that he had urinated in a stranger's furniture while she and her boyfriend watched. Once everyone understood that nobody had been harmed, the story became funny. My roommates laughed. My boyfriend laughed. Even I eventually laughed, although I had been genuinely frightened during the night. The brother apologized repeatedly. I felt bad for him because there was nothing he could do to change what had happened. He had been completely asleep. He did not seem like a dangerous person when awake. In normal conversation, he was friendly and embarrassed by the entire incident. That made the difference between his awake and sleeping behavior even stranger. The person I saw in my bedroom did not feel like the same person I spoke to the next morning. The brother also replaced the bedside table. Because the old one had been ruined, I ended up getting a new table for free. That was at least one positive result. For a long time afterward, we joked about it. Someone would mention The Conjuring, and I would remember the real horror happening beside me while the movie played. My boyfriend sometimes copied the brother's blank stare, though it was never as frightening in daylight. The event became one of those stories that sounds hilarious when told after the danger has passed. A sleepwalking man mistook a drawer for a toilet. He sat on the bed. He ran into the living room. Nobody was hurt, but in the moment, it did not feel funny. When I first heard someone enter my room, I believed a stranger was coming toward me while I slept. When he opened the drawer, I thought he was searching through my belongings. When the liquid sound began, I could not understand what was happening. Then I looked into the face of a person whose eyes were open, but whose mind was still asleep. That empty stare is what stayed with me most. I have seen people who were drunk, confused, exhausted, or half awake. This was different. There was no normal recognition in his face. When my boyfriend yelled at him, he did not react the way an awake person would. He did not apologize, become angry, or ask where he was. He only stared. The horror movie music made it worse, but the expression itself was terrifying. It felt as though something else had taken control of his body while he was gone. I do not believe anything supernatural happened. I know sleepwalking is a real condition. People can complete surprisingly complex actions while remaining asleep. They can walk through rooms, speak, eat, move furniture, and even leave their homes. The brother's brain was simply in a strange state between sleeping and waking. Still, understanding the science does not completely remove the fear. A sleepwalker looks human because they are human, but their movements and expressions can feel slightly wrong. They may respond without really understanding. They may look directly at you without seeing you. That is why sleepwalkers still frighten me. After that night, I became more careful about locking my bedroom door when unfamiliar people stayed in the apartment. I also learned that waking a sleepwalker by yelling is probably not the best response. My boyfriend had reacted out of shock, and I could not blame him. He had gone from being deeply asleep to seeing a stranger sitting at the foot of the bed. Anyone might have shouted. Fortunately, the brother did not become aggressive or injure himself. He simply wandered away and returned to sleep. The story could have ended much worse. He might have fallen downstairs, left the apartment, or walked into traffic. He could have entered the kitchen and picked up something sharp. He could have reacted violently when my boyfriend yelled. Instead, the only real victim was my bedside table. I still feel bad for him when I remember how embarrassed he looked the next morning. He had to listen while a group of people explained something humiliating that he could not remember doing. I tried not to make him feel worse than he already did. The situation had terrified me, but it was not his fault. He had not deliberately entered my room or damaged my belongings. His sleeping brain had simply made several very bad choices. Even now, I can laugh when I tell the story. The details are ridiculous. My boyfriend slept through a horror movie while a stranger entered the room. The stranger opened my drawer and used it as a toilet. I turned away because I did not want to wake anyone. Then he sat on the bed while I kicked at him. My boyfriend woke up, shouted, and the sleepwalker stared at us while creepy music played. We escaped to the living room, only for him to sprint after us, stare again, and then return to bed. The next day, I received a new table. It sounds like a scene written for a strange comedy, but when I remember the darkness, the footsteps, and the blank expression on his face, I still feel some of the fear from that night. The funniest stories can sometimes begin as terrifying experiences. This was definitely one of them. I can laugh now, but I still lock my bedroom door when I know a sleepwalker is nearby. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, my mother and I went into town one Sunday afternoon. It was the kind of day when many families were outside. The weather was pleasant, the streets were busy, and children were running around while their parents sat nearby talking. At that age, I did not pay much attention to where we were going. I simply followed my mother. Walking around town with her felt completely safe. I believed that as long as she was somewhere close, nothing bad could happen to me. While we were walking, my mother ran into one of her friends. They were happy to see each other and decided to sit down at a cafe for coffee. The cafe had an outdoor seating area, and directly in front of it was a small public garden where many children were playing. It was Sunday, so the garden was crowded. Children were running between the trees, playing games, chasing one another, and climbing on anything they could find. Parents sat at tables nearby, drinking coffee and talking while still being able to look across at their children. My mother and her friend wanted to catch up, but I quickly became bored. Adult conversations seemed to last forever when I was a child. They talked about people I did not know and things I did not understand. I moved around the table, looked toward the garden, and probably interrupted my mother several times. Eventually, she told me I could go and play with the other children. The garden was directly in front of the cafe, and there were so many families around that it seemed completely safe. My mother believed she would be able to see me from where she was sitting. I was excited to get away from the table. I ran toward the garden and joined the other children. I do not remember exactly what game we were playing. At that age, children did not always need a plan. We simply ran around, followed one another, and invented games that changed every few minutes. I remember feeling happy and comfortable. There were people everywhere. The cafe was close. My mother was sitting only a short distance away. I had no reason to believe I was in danger. Then a young man approached me. At the time, he looked very old to me because I was only 5 or 6. From what I can remember now, he was probably around 20 to 25 years old. He was not an old man. He was a young adult. I do not remember every detail of his face or clothing. What I remember most clearly is the way he spoke to me and how quickly I trusted him. He came close and asked if I wanted to see a beautiful bird and her heart. It was a strange question, but I was too young to understand how strange it really was. Children are curious. If an adult says they know where to find an animal, toy, or secret place, it can sound exciting. I asked him where the bird was. He told me that he would show me. He said it was not far away. He spoke as though it was something special that only he knew about. There was no clear threat in his voice. He did not grab me immediately or shout at me. He simply offered to show me something interesting. I said okay. That decision still frightens me when I think about it now. I did not look back at my mother. I did not tell any of the children where I was going. I did not ask the man his name or why the bird was not in the garden. I was only a small child, and I believed an adult who said he had something beautiful to show me. The man took my hand. Then he began leading me away. I followed him without understanding what I was doing. The cafe and the garden were still close at first. There were people around, and I probably believed we would only walk a few steps. He had said it was not far. We moved away from the children and entered a nearby yard. I do not remember whether there was a gate or an opening in a fence. I only remember that the space felt more private than the garden. Once we entered, the sounds of the children and the calf seemed farther away. The man told me that I needed to sit on his lap. He said he would invite the bird to come. That was when the situation began to feel wrong. Until then, I had been focused on seeing the bird. I expected him to point toward a tree, cage, or nest. Instead, he wanted me to sit on him. I hesitated. He continued talking about the bird and her heart. He told me that he had buried the bird's heart somewhere in the yard. He said that he would bring a beautiful girl, and then the bird would get her heart back. Even as a child, I could not understand what he meant. His words did not fit together. How could a bird be alive without her heart? Why had he buried it? Why did he need a beautiful girl? Why did I have to sit on his lap? His story had sounded magical when he first mentioned a beautiful bird. Now it sounded dark and confusing. Something inside me warned me that I needed to leave. I did not understand exactly what the man wanted. I did not know the words for the kind of danger I may have been facing. But I knew I no longer wanted to see the bird. The yard felt too quiet. The man was too close. My mother could not see me anymore. I told him I would rather not sit on his lap. I said I did not care about the bird. He tried to keep me there, still talking as though he could convince me. But the excitement I had felt was gone. All I wanted was to return to my mother. I moved away from him. Then I ran. He shouted for me to come back. Hearing him call after me made me even more frightened. A normal person would have understood that a child had changed their mind. They would not have become angry or tried to stop the child from leaving. He wanted me to return. That told me I had made the right decision. I ran as fast as my small legs would allow. I did not look behind me. I was afraid he might be following me. The yard was very close to the calf, but in that moment, the distance felt much longer. I only focused on reaching the garden and finding my mother. I could hear my own breathing and the sound of my feet hitting the ground. I expected the man to grab me from behind. He did not. I reached the public area again and saw my mother standing in front of the calf. She was looking for me. She was crying. The other children were still around, but my mother had realized I was no longer among them. She had probably looked across the garden and expected to see me playing. When she could not find me, she must have panicked. I cannot imagine what went through her mind during those minutes. She had allowed me to play only a short distance away. There were many other children and adults nearby. Then I had disappeared. She did not know that I had followed a stranger. She did not know where I had gone or whether someone had taken me. When she saw me running back, she rushed toward me. She asked where I had been. I did not tell her the truth. I only said I had been wandering around. I do not know why I hid what had happened. Maybe I thought I would be punished for leaving the garden. Maybe I felt embarrassed because I had followed a stranger. Maybe I did not fully understand that the man had done something wrong. Children sometimes keep frightening experiences secret because they think adults will blame them. I knew my mother had told me to stay in the garden. I had disobeyed her. In my child's mind, that may have seemed like the most important part of the story. I did not explain that a young man had approached me. I did not tell her about the beautiful bird. I did not tell her that he had held my hand and taken me into a yard. I did not tell her he wanted me to sit on his lap. I did not tell her he shouted for me to return when I ran away. I simply allowed her to believe I had walked away on my own. My mother was probably angry and relieved at the same time. She kept me close after that, and we eventually went home. To her, it may have remained a frightening moment when her child disappeared briefly in a crowded public place. She never knew how much worse it could have been. As I grew older, I began to understand what had happened. The man had not been trying to show me a bird. There may never have been a bird. The story was only a way to make me follow him. He had chosen something a child might find beautiful and interesting. He did not offer me money or something obviously suspicious. He offered me a secret, a beautiful bird and her heart. His words were confusing enough to sound magical to a young child. Once he had me away from the calf, his behavior changed. He wanted me on his lap. He spoke about bringing a beautiful girl to return the bird's heart. I still do not know exactly what he planned to do. I do not like imagining it. There are many possibilities, and all of them are frightening. He may have wanted to touch me. He may have planned to take me somewhere farther away. Maybe someone else was waiting nearby. Maybe the yard belonged to him, or maybe he had chosen it because nobody was there. I was lucky that something inside me recognized the danger before it was too late. I was also lucky the yard was close to the calf. If he had led me farther away before asking me to sit down, I may not have found my way back so easily. If he had taken me into a building or vehicle, running may not have been possible. If he had covered my mouth or held me tightly, nobody nearby may have heard me. At 5 or 6 years old, I was small enough for an adult to carry. The only reason I escaped was that he had not fully controlled me yet. I often wonder why he let me run. Maybe he was afraid of being seen chasing a child. We were still near a busy public area, and my mother was already searching. If he had followed me into the garden, adults may have noticed. Maybe he believed shouting would be enough to make me return. Children are taught to obey adults, and he may have expected me to listen. Fortunately, I did not. That moment taught me something before I was old enough to fully understand it. Sometimes fear arrives before the explanation. I did not know what kind of person he was. I did not know what crime he might have intended. I only knew his story no longer made sense, and that being close to him felt wrong. That feeling saved me. Years later, I finally understood why adults warn children not to follow strangers, even if the stranger seems friendly. Dangerous people do not always look frightening. They do not always threaten a child immediately. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they speak gently. Sometimes they offer to show you an animal. They use curiosity, because curiosity can be stronger than fear when you are young. The man probably knew that. He approached me while I was separated from my mother. He saw that I was playing without an adult directly beside me. He may have been watching the garden and waiting for the right child. The thought that he might have planned it makes me feel sick. Was I the first child he approached? Did he try the same story on others? Had he used different stories before? Maybe he told another child about a puppy, a toy, or a secret place. I hope he never succeeded. I hope every child he approached became frightened and ran away. But I cannot know that. I never told my mother, so the police were not contacted. No adult searched for him. He was free to remain in the area and approach someone else. That thought gives me guilt sometimes, even though I know I was only a child. At 5 or 6, I was not responsible for stopping him. I did not understand that telling my mother could protect other children. I was only thinking about avoiding trouble. Still, I wish I had spoken. My mother might have remembered what he looked like. Other parents could have been warned. Someone might have checked the yard. Perhaps the man could have been identified. Instead, the entire experience remained only inside my memory. I did not even understand it properly until years later. The phrase about the bird's heart stayed with me. It was so unusual that I could not forget it. Most adults trying to lure a child might promise sweets or toys. This man created a strange story. He said the bird's heart was buried in the yard. He said he would bring a beautiful girl, and then the bird would get her heart back. Sometimes I wonder whether those words had meaning to him. Maybe he was mentally unwell. Maybe he believed what he was saying. Maybe it was part of a fantasy he had used before. Or maybe he was only speaking nonsense because he knew a small child would not ask difficult questions. Whatever the reason, the words still make me uncomfortable. They turned something innocent, a beautiful bird, into something disturbing. I can still picture the yard when I think about it. The normal sounds of Sunday were close, but not close enough. My mother was sitting at the calf, believing I was safe. Other children were playing in the garden. Only a short distance away, a stranger was asking me to sit on his lap and talking about a buried heart. The ordinary world continued around us. Nobody saw what was happening. That is one of the most frightening parts. People often imagine attempted kidnappings happening in empty streets or dark places. This happened in the middle of the day, near a crowded calf, with families all around. The man did not need complete privacy. He only needed a few moments when nobody was watching closely. My mother had looked away to speak with her friend. The other children were busy playing. He approached me, took my hand, and walked away. It probably looked normal to anyone who saw us. They may have assumed he was my older brother, uncle, or family friend. A child walking beside an adult does not always attract attention. That is how easily I disappeared from my mother's sight. The experience also changed how I think about children's memories. Some adults believe very young children do not remember serious events clearly. I do not remember every detail of that day, but I remember the fear. I remember the man's offer. I remember his hand taking mine. I remember the yard. I remember refusing to sit on his lap. I remember him shouting when I ran. I remember my mother crying in front of the calf. Those moments stayed because my mind understood they were important, even if I did not understand why. For years, I wondered whether I had made the story stranger in my memory. Could he have been showing me a real bird? Could I have misunderstood what he meant? Maybe there was an injured bird in the yard, but those explanations do not fit his behavior. A person helping an injured bird would not need a child to sit on his lap. They would not lead a child away without asking the parent. They would not shout for the child to return after the child became afraid. His intentions were not innocent. I am certain of that now. I sometimes imagine telling my mother the truth today. I wonder how she would react. She might blame herself for sending me to play. She should not. The garden was full of families, and she was only a short distance away. Parents cannot keep their eyes on a child every second. The blame belongs only to the man who saw a small child and chose to lead them away. My mother already suffered enough during the minutes she could not find me. Learning how close I came to real danger might still hurt her. That may be one reason I kept the story secret for so long, but silence also allowed the memory to grow inside me. Every few years I thought about the man again. I pictured what might have happened if I had obeyed him. What if I had sat on his lap? What if I had waited for the imaginary bird? What if he had convinced me to go somewhere else? What if my mother had looked for me in the wrong direction? What if we had been farther from the calf than I remembered? The possible endings are endless. I try not to imagine them, but sometimes my mind goes there anyway. In one version, he takes me into a house. In another, he places me in a car. In another, my mother never sees me again. Those thoughts are difficult because the distance between what happened and what could have happened was so small. One decision changed everything. I said I did not care about the bird. Then I ran. A child should never be blamed for trusting an adult. Children are born expecting adults to guide and protect them. The man used that trust against me, but I am proud of the child I was for recognizing that something felt wrong. I did not stay because I was afraid of being rude. I did not obey him simply because he was older. I listened to the fear inside me. I ran back to safety. Today, I think the most important part of the story is not that I followed him. It is that I left. Children need to know they can change their minds. They can run. They can scream. They can refuse an adult. They do not need to be polite when they feel unsafe. I wish I had also known that I could tell my mother everything without being blamed. Maybe then the man would have been reported. Maybe another child would have been protected. I will never know. All I know is that on a busy Sunday afternoon, a stranger offered to show me a beautiful bird and her heart. I believed him. I followed him away from my mother. Then he asked me to sit on his lap and began talking about a heart buried in the ground. Something inside me finally understood. I ran. My mother found me. I went home safely. And for the rest of my life, I have been left wondering what would have happened if I had stayed in that yard for only a few minutes longer. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nockmeyer Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night, and if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.